So, Saket, everything is ready?
Yes, sir. Principal sir is also here.
Okay, Principal sir has joined, right?
Yes.
So, in next 1 minute, we should begin now. Basuman.
Can you hear me? It's
Yes, ma'am.
I'm coming in loud and clear. Good.
Yeah.
I can't hear the principal.
I think we should begin, Basu.
Good afternoon, and am I audible? Good afternoon and welcome to this very significant keynote session of today's first inaugural day of our online international seminar. And we are very, very proud and privileged to welcome amongst us Professor Christie Carson. Before the session formally begins, I would like to request the principal of our college, Dr. Mohammad Reyaz, to welcome our speaker and all our participants to this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Basu. Honorable keynote speaker, Professor Christie Carson, respected colleagues, distinguished guests, dear students, and member of academic fraternity. It gives me immense pleasure to extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to all of you on behalf of Karim City College at this prestigious keynote session on a 3-day online international conference titled All the World Stage Shakespeare and Digital Humanities, Exploring the Bard in the Agglomeratic Age. Today we honored to host a scholar of international repute, Christie Carson, reader Emerita in Shakespeare and Performance at Royal Holloway University of London, UK. As an institution committed to fostering critical inquiry and cultural dialogue, Karim City College is privileged to provide this platform where ideas transit boundary and scholarship between a shared celebration. The presence of Christie Carson here today is a testament to the enduring relevance of Shakespeare and the power of performance to contact diverse communities. On behalf of Karim City College, I extend our deepest gratitude to Christie Carson to gracing us with her presence and to all of you for joining us in this academic celebration. Welcome, and let us begin this journey of learning together. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your warm welcome. And with your blessings, we hope that this session will be very successful. Well, the internet is a stage, and who better to talk about it than Professor Christie Carson. Christie Carson is Reader Emerita in Shakespeare and Performance in the Department of English at Royal Holloway University of London. An early adopter of digital methods, she has studied the impact of digital resources on teaching and developed a hybrid approach to criticism which employs digital resources and combines it with the detail and specificity of close reading and performance. Her intention is to situate performance texts closely in a political, historical, and social milieu in line with the methods of theatre history research. She's the co-editor of 4 marvelous collections of essays: Shakespeare's Globe, a theatrical experiment; Shakespeare in Stages, New Theatre Histories; Shakespeare Beyond English, and Shakespeare and the Digital World. Her most recent publication, Shakespeare in the Theatre, the Stratford Festival, provides a critical history of this Canadian institution as part of the Ardent Shakespeare series. Her international research profile is based on a marvelous series of projects with Cambridge University Press over a period of 22 years in the field of Shakespeare and performance history. Over her career, she has developed many interesting approaches to theatre, and we hope that she will throw light on some of these as she talks to us today. Thank you very much for being here with us, and we look forward to your talk. Over to you, Professor Christie.
Thank you. And I'll just share my screen if I can. Hang on a second. Okay. Can you see that? Is that all right? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, greetings from Stratford upon Avon. And this is a very busy weekend. It's Shakespeare's birthday weekend, and so we're I'm running from one event to another, but I'm very pleased to be with you today. And I'm going to, in this paper, try to give you an overview of my entire career working in creating digital resources for an international audience. The technology and the critical and political context of this work have changed dramatically over the last 30 years, but the driving force, the key idea behind it all, has remained the same. I believe that there is no right way to interpret and produce Shakespeare's plays. They have endured and flourished in an international environment because they are filled with human emotions and complex situations that are recognizable across both time and cultures. They're not timeless, but time-full of potential. And to my mind, comparative performance history is one of the very best ways of demonstrating this idea. The 3 projects that I'm going to look at today, Cambridge King Lear's CD-ROM Text and Performance Archive, Designing Shakespeare, an audiovisual archive in Stratford and London from 1960 to 2000, and the interactive texts, which I've developed most recently for Digital Theatre Plus, give an overview of my career in this field. I hope to highlight the methodologies that I've used, as well as some of the concrete strategies for teaching the plays outside an English tradition. Coming from a Commonwealth country myself, Canada, but living in Britain for many years, I hope to illustrate the way that being from 2 worlds has helped me to create resources that are open to debate and dialogue, rather than presenting best practice or a didactic approach. I've always worked to create performance history that is open and inclusive, rather than closed and hierarchical. To begin this history, which started when I joined Royal Holloway, University of London in 1996, I need to start with another history, the performance history of King Lear. The history of the play's textual and performance life must accommodate 2 early texts. The quarto, which you can see here, of 1608, and the folio of 1623. These editions have significant differences from one another. Then came a period of 150 years when an adaptation of the play, which gave it a happy ending, which you can witness here, Nahum Tate's restoration version of the play, followed on stage. Following on from Nahum Tate's restoration version, the quarto and the folio were then conflated into editions which assumed that more Shakespeare was better than less Shakespeare. And again, we have a number of those editions here. The task in hand for the CD-ROM was to create the first digital edition of the play published by an academic press, which would provide the user with evidence of how the text was altered over time, both for in print and for performance. The result, the Cambridge King Lear CD-ROM Text and Performance Archive, contained 10 texts of the play, as you can see in the table of contents, as well as essays on the play's history in the UK, Australia, and North America. The aim of the CD was to present the text in a non-hierarchical way, which demonstrated changing cultural priorities rather than a progressive understanding. The ordering was simply chronological. At the center of the CD was what we called the finder text. This was not designed to be authoritative or definitive, but rather it was a text that held together all of the other information. It was a navigational device, which allowed for a very different way of looking at Shakespeare's textual and performance history than had been possible in print editions. And again, you can see it's a little old-fashioned now, but there's a little icon there, and there's one at the side as well, which showed links to the other information. The final CD aimed to add visual representations of performance so that it was possible to see a list of images of the history of a particular scene, or the chronological list of performances in the English-speaking world. When it was first produced, the greatest achievement of this project was to bring together physical resources that resided in different continents and were held in libraries, which required individual readers' cards. I had a great stack of them by the end of the research process. The 400-year history of King Lear in English was documented in one place for the first time when the CD was published in 2000. At this time, the internet was still in its infancy, and large digital projects like this one aimed to tackle the physical distances that researchers had to travel and the restrictions in place which barred access to rare and delicate resources. Bringing research materials together in this way was designed to pry open the doors of research libraries and make their contents more widely available. But of course, the CD, as the product of an academic press, came with a cost to the user, and so fundamentally was only available to institutions with computer networks and well-funded libraries. The democratization of resources that I'd hoped for was not fully achieved, although the CD did put down a marker, illustrating what digital resources could achieve. It was a good beginning. Unfortunately, the depth of research required to create this comprehensive resource was not possible for every play. So the next project, Designing Shakespeare, Audiovisual Archive, Stratford and London, 1960 to 2000, aimed to tackle that by providing access to the rich resources available for the study of performance from a different angle. Instead, it covered the entire Shakespeare canon, but over a much shorter period and a narrow geographic region. It also added sound and video to what had been a silent range of resources. While video performance was the initial aim of the new project, copyright and budget restrictions meant that rather than performance clips, the audiovisual elements of the archive consisted of interviews with designers. These are the partners. So the Designing a Shakespeare collection included 4 different databases, thousands of images, interviews with key theater directors, and VRML models of the theaters most commonly used. Working with the renowned theater designer, Chris Dyer, he was the one who was able to bring in the idea of 3D models. And we had the 10 stages most used for Shakespeare performance in Stratford and London. This Arts and Humanities Research Council funded project involved 3 research assistants and a significant collaboration also with the theater photographer Donald Cooper. And again, it shows us it was designed to provide an overview of the theater history, and again, teaching for research students, scholars, but also theater audiences and practitioners. And what was wonderful was what we were able to make it freely available online. So this is just a selection of the images. Theater design is an often overlooked when scholars examine Shakespeare and performance, but the role of design has become increasingly important, particularly, I would suggest, in international adaptations of the play, which draw on other theater traditions, a few of which you saw in that selection there. It was to focus some light on the crucial work of the designer that I put together this collaborative project. The job of the designer is to find a prism through which to view the play that sheds new light on it for members of the audience in attendance. So while the production of the past may not look urgent to us, the images that they present to their own audience had an impact that was entirely tied to the moment of reception. The aim of any successful production is to find a visual cues which will make it important and powerful for a present audience. When interpreting the play for an audience today, designers must find ways to translate the social environment of the play into one which can be easily recognized from visual markers that come from our period, not Shakespeare's. Stage design from the past can look dated, and in fact, it is. In looking at Shakespeare, Dennis Kennedy writes, "The visual history of performance, which has often been excluded from Shakespeare studies, rewards extended investigation because of its intriguing relationship to the status and uses of Shakespeare, both in the theater and in the culture at large." I'm just wondering if I move into presentation mode, if that's might be better. Is that better, or is it the same? Well, I just want you to be able to see. Can you see the full quotation? Okay, great. Why is it not moving forward now? Okay, this is not moving forward now, so I don't know how to get out of this. Sorry, this suddenly not wanting to move forward. Sorry, I'll come out of that again. Right. So just to show you how it worked, there would be, for each production, for each play, there was a list of productions, and then that list of productions would then be expanded. You could go into each one and see a review extract, the information of all of the people who were involved in it, and then thumbnails of the individual production images, which then could be expanded. This is Chris Dyer, who was one of our main collaborators. The project was conceived with Chris Dyer and the theater designer, and Donald Cooper, the theater photographer. And it was aimed to fill the gap in Shakespeare studies, for the study of Shakespeare and performance for students and scholars working in theater history, but also in practical stage design. As an often overlooked linchpin in productions, we wanted to illustrate how design could be a valid form of Shakespearean interpretation alongside the more widely studied practices of acting and directing. We wanted to demonstrate how design creates a lasting connection with the plays that bypasses the distancing effects of the Elizabethan text, illustrating how theater design is the link between the past and the present for audiences trying to connect with these 400-year-old texts in performance. And again, Dennis Kennedy talks about the fact that Shakespeare in translation is often closer to its audience because it doesn't have that distancing of the Elizabethan text. So making materials about performance available digitally was important because it allowed the project to provide a comprehensive overview of the period covered for a global audience. As I say, from 2003 to 2019, Designing Shakespeare gave users access to several different forms of memories of performance, of the performance events of the past to take advantage of the opportunity of digital dissemination. Visual imagery, review extracts, and 3D models of the theaters. And again, I have a little display of how those worked. That indicated scale and audience relationship in performance were combined with the memories of the creative process recounted by the designers themselves. These were collected together to provide a rich tapestry of online information. Because these resources were made freely available, they then made their way into lecture halls and seminar rooms around the globe. By documenting the entire canon in performance, the aim was to shift criticism from analysis of individual productions in isolation to thinking about performance as a history of social and cultural interaction, charting trends in performance and design. Peter Brook, in The Empty Space, articulates why this was necessary. It is not only the hairstyles, costumes, and makeups that look dated after 5 years. All the different elements of staging, shorthands of behavior that stand in for certain emotions, gestures, gesticulations, and tones of voice are all fluctuating on an invisible stock exchange all of the time. Life is moving, influences are playing on actor and audience, and other plays, other arts, the cinema, television, current events, join in the constant rewriting of history and the amending of the daily truth. To illustrate this daily truth and the way it shifted, it was essential to provide access to the thoughts and motivations of key designers, who together highlighted that the plays and performance are not just a form of entertainment, but part of an ongoing cultural history that records and even influences the way that these plays help to form our vision of ourselves. Dennis Kennedy says, "The visual signs of the performance generates are not only the guide to its social and cultural meaning, but often constitute the meaning itself." Or to quote Sally Jacobs, one of the designers, she talks about the way that designers make metaphors out of materials. So reintroducing context and cultural history to contemporary performance was the purpose of the research project, Designing Shakespeare. And this set of resources illustrated the past practice before the quite dramatic changes of the 21st century took place. An awful lot of design now is projection and generated by computer. They tell the backstory to the present moment. So jumping closer to the present moment, in the intervening years, and during my 24 years at Royal Holloway, I spent 7 years in the drama department and 15 years in the English department. And in between those two, I spent 2 years in the English Subject Centre, the National Centre for Innovation in Teaching and Higher Education in the UK. And I was able to put together 2 national events about teaching Shakespeare, which again were designed not to disseminate best practice, but to share it. We weren't trying to tell people how the best way to address the plays. We wanted to bring people together so that they could share their own experiences. And throughout my time at Royal Holloway, I've taught students in the English and Drama program and was the convener of the core course, which was called Shakespeare Page to Stage. So after 2 decades of employing these resources, both in the English Subject Centre and in the English department at Royal Holloway, I was delighted to work with Talia Rogers, the head of higher education at Digital Theatre Plus. And for the first time, we worked to license 3 of the interviews with designers, which were then no longer available freely online. So the three designers whose work she chose to preserve were extremely important in the history of British design. Sally Jacobs, who I've already mentioned, not only worked with Peter Brook on the famous White Box Midsummer Night's Dream, but also with John Barton at the Royal Shakespeare Company, designing over 60 productions over her career. Ralph Colty, the second designer, worked at the National Theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he was very influential in the sculptural design, which featured multiple reflective surfaces. And I think his influence can still be seen today. To have the opportunity to hear these designers, who have both passed away in the recent years, speak about their working lives is a rare opportunity. Nick Ormerod, the third of the designers that are available, interviews that are available on Digital Theatre Plus, provides insight into working with just one director and one company in his interview, which covers the early years of the influential company he co-founded, Cheek by Jowl. All three designers discuss their training and early careers, as well as their influences, but the key aspect of these explorations is an account of how these designers work with directors and with the Shakespeare text to come to an understanding of how the production will look for an audience. The experience of each of these designers is different, but they share a passion for conveying meaning through spatial relations and costume design. Delving into the world of theater design history provides a key area of investigation for Shakespeare and Performance scholars and students. And I think this is especially true for interpretations of Shakespearean languages other than English. So moving to the final project I want to look at, and the one which represents in essence a full circle moment for me, was these interactive texts. After developing several short films and creating a number of critical essays for Digital Theatre Plus, Talia Rogers asked me to work with her to develop the site's first textual resources. The Digital Theatre Plus is a bit like a Netflix for live performance. There are hundreds of videos of performance of different kinds, and a lot of them are Shakespeare related. So beginning with Macbeth, we created a new kind of interactive text that employed the open source Shakespeare edition and adapted the foundational idea of the CD-ROM, using the text of the play as a navigational device to support the study of the performance. Being given the opportunity to annotate Macbeth, Hamlet, The Tempest, and most importantly for me, King Lear, to highlight the performance possibilities in the text, was the fruition of my many years of working in this field. It's been gratifying to be able to funnel all of that experience into the creation of these new resources. I've used everything that I've learned over my career to create a close analysis of the text that focuses on three pathways: language, character, and technical theater, highlighting performance variations through video clips from specific productions, which are available in full on the Digital Theatre Plus site. So this is, as I say, we've always wanted to use digital video, but it's very hard to license. And these, because they're within the subscription service, we could use clips from any of the productions that they held. So these texts do not aim to present a comprehensive performance history as my first two projects did, but rather use the available productions to highlight key moments in the text where interpretation can change the meaning of the play at a particular moment for a specific audience. So I want to illustrate how the annotations focus on one aspect of the page-to-stage relationship, but can be used to generate a wide-ranging discussion about the plays. So I'm going to shift a little bit from just demonstrating resources to talking about the ways that I might, or you might, anyone might use them in teaching. I'm going to look at King Lear and language, Hamlet and character, and Macbeth and technical theater to give you a sense of the three different pathways. And in all three cases, I want to highlight the opening of the play to see how Shakespeare sets the scene. In the first two, I'm going to explore the use of repetition and keywords or phrases that link with the larger themes in the play. Nothing in King Lear, and a little more than kin and less than kind in Hamlet. In the third example, I'm going to illustrate the social and cultural world of the play can frame the audience's experience. So we'll look at three examples of Macbeth, and I'm going to end with one which I hope will be of relevance to this particular audience. So just looking at the way this it works, you can see that the text in question is highlighted, and then there is a box which has some information about, there's a statement followed by a question, and then there are illustrations of that text as it has been performed. So these are the three examples from King Lear that I had available to me. One from the Almeida Theatre, one from the Stratford Festival, which again was a full circle moment for me because that's the theatre I grew up with. And then this third one, Talowa, the Talowa Theatre, a Black British company. So just looking at the way the note works, So it's a language note, and it's looking at Act 1, Scene 1, line 85 to 93. And the statement is, the word nothing is repeated 5 times in 4 lines. And the question, how does this exchange alter the rhythm of the language and focus attention on a key theme in the play? Now, the idea that nothing is repeated 5 times in 4 lines is one of the things I wanted to focus on. First of all, starting at the very, very basic level of what does the word nothing mean. So a noun meaning not anything, no single thing, something of no importance, or no amount, 0. And again, just thinking about whether or not each time the word is spoken, does it mean the same thing? Now, I was very pleased to discover that I can show you this particular scene from the Stratford Festival in a way that is directly related to the way that it works in the interactive text. Unfortunately, the other ones I'm going to have to give you sort of a more general sense of the production, but we'll just show you this opening. Hopefully this will work.
Now, our joy, although our last and whose young love the vines of France, milk of Burgundy, strive to be interested. What could you say? Draw a third more opulent than your sisters. Speak.
Nothing, my lord. Nothing.
Nothing will come of nothing. Speak again.
Okay. So the nice thing about, again, having this particular production for me is that the Stratford Festival has been going for almost as long as the Royal Shakespeare Company, since 1953. And it's the theater that I know best, and it was wonderful for me to be able to put it alongside some of the British productions. So
I'm happy.
looking at the how this can instigate a discussion. If we're looking at the opening of the play, it's important that to think about the way the characters are established and the tone is set. All of the relationships are clearly drawn and established, and all of the issues which lead to the downfall of the king and the kingdom are clearly mapped out. So King Lear explores the connection between the king and his daughters, and one of the things I think is worth thinking about is the way that, in terms of language, how the daughters address their father, but also their king. And one of the questions, again, I like to put to students is, does the mode of address change depending upon the social context created on stage and the time period that it's set in? So all of the themes of King Lear, of which, there are many, as I've listed: family, duty, loyalty, love, aging, madness, parental responsibility, the shifting power between generations, and the power of kingship, can all be discussed in relation to this very, very short interpretation of, a very short scene, but differently interpreted. So in order to determine the next ruler, the king asked each of his daughters to declare their love for him. But it's important to highlight that, this was an entirely new way of determining the passage of power from one generation to the next than would have been the norm in Shakespeare's day. It's based on merit and the performance of duty. And it's quite a radical thing that Shakespeare was doing, suggesting just after the time of when, the succession to the throne had been so hotly debated in the lead up to the death of Elizabeth I. So one of the questions is whether the production addresses this notion of a radical departure from tradition in its staging. So the first of these productions that I had at my disposal was the Emerita production from London in 2012, starring Jonathan Pryce. And again, you can see from the costumes and the set, this is more going back to my designing Shakespeare way of thinking. I have still images that I can show you. You can see that they're it's set in the past, but it's kind of a mythic past. There was a King Lear of Leicester in 800 AD, and sometimes people are use the costumes and set to sort of suggest that early period. And in the short exchange, we also see the relationship between the sisters and Cordelia, and also the relationship between Lear and Cordelia here, a very close relationship, obviously. And one of the reasons I'm suggesting that Shakespeare's popularity has endured is his use of pervasive myths and folk tales. In this case, you can almost see the resonances of the Job story from the Bible, but also a little bit of Cinderella with the two older sisters who are unkind. But he tells the story with a great difference. Again, differences between the period and today. The father at the time would be all-powerful within the family in terms of determining the daughter's future, and the king would be all-powerful in the matter of in terms of determining matters of state. So King Lear is going against, and we wonder if Shakespeare is even criticizing a little bit the rules of primogeniture. He has no son, and yet wants to make a peaceful transition to the next generation. But one of the things that's interesting about the way that the play works is that it is Cordelia is given a number of asides in her before she speaks to her father. And in this third production, if I were able to show you the scene, those asides are actually cut. And one of the things I wanted to think about was the way that that changes the relationship with the audience. And you can see just a little bit at the back of this stage is that this was actually produced in the round. So the audience is all around the characters. You can also see that the distance between the characters is slightly different as well. So one of the questions I like to ask students is, why does Cordelia defy her father's will? She can be seen as very pious and honest and truthful, but she can also be seen as quite stubborn, chip off the old block. And again, just looking at the stance, the distance between her and her father, this Cordelia was certainly a little bit more a chip off the old block kind. So while there's significant differences between the three productions, what I'm suggesting is that there were similarities in some respects in that they all presented a king of former times. And if we look at them side by side, you can see they are quite, well, they're quite different in terms of, I would say particularly the formality of the court in the second two. One of the things that's interesting to highlight is the fact that the love contest as it's set up is both public and quite competitive. So the results for daughters are quite disastrous. I think we're getting some sound from someone else. But also quite humiliating for the king if he is not obeyed. So I'm going to move on to Hamlet for the second example. And this time I'm looking at a note which is about character. And it's possible to show the link, I think, between character and language in the way that these particular productions create an environment for the play. Again, we're looking at the beginning of the play, and this is a Stratford Festival. And you can see that this is a thrust stage, and the audience are on three sides of the action. And this, again, is a somewhat formal and historical setting. Now, this time the note says, it's a character note from Act 1, Scene 2, line 267 to 89. And it starts off with a statement. Claudius and Gertrude both ask Hamlet to improve his mood. How does this short conversation establish the relationship between the characters? And again, on this occasion, I had two Stratford Festival productions, one from 2016 and one from 2022 to illustrate it, and one from the Royal Shakespeare Company in 2016. Now, this time the focus is a little bit different in that I'm trying to highlight relationships, but also a key sentence, a little more than kin and less than kind. So again, I'm going to look at the Stratford Festival, but unfortunately I don't have the specific bit of text. I'm going to give you the trailer instead, which gives you a sort of overview of this production. So the interesting thing about this production is that it starts with what looks like quite a historical setting, and as the play goes forward, it actually moves forward in terms of time. So it becomes more contemporary as the play moves on. So again, we're looking at the events at the start of the play, and showing the way that the whole that Shakespeare sets the action in motion, and then and as I say, this focus on a little more than kin and less than kind, exploring the relationship between Hamlet and his mother, who has recently lost her husband, as I'm sure you know, and married his brother or his uncle, Hamlet Senior's brother. So again, some of the questions I like to pose to the students are, why can Hamlet not accept his mother's behavior? And how does he use language to articulate his feelings towards the other characters? Now, if we shift to a different cultural environment, one of the things that's interesting about the examples I was able to draw on here is that I was able to look at issues of both culture and race. And the 2016 production, the RSC production, also brings in a little bit, at least, of the idea of, does a difference setting it in a contemporary family environment, but also in a different country, change the nature of the scene and the nature of the relationships. This Royal Shakespeare Company production is set in an undisclosed African country, but it also addresses the idea, as I say, of racial identity, but also touches on British colonial issues, because the whole play starts with a graduation seemingly at a British university, where Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are British students, and so when they come to visit the African nation, they bring, tacky British things like, tea and little examples of little models of double-decker buses. So just thinking about how you can bring the play up to date and what that means, what is the modern response for a mother and son, and again, this idea of kin and kind. So this, again, is not exactly the part of the play that I was highlighting, but it definitely does show the nature of this Hamlet as performed by Papa Esuedu.
For good Horatio, I'll take the ghost's word for £1,000. Did proceed. Very well, my lord. You took the poison. The music, come the recorders.
Vouchsafe me a word with you.
Sir, a whole history.
King, sir.
Hi, sir, what's up, him?
Is in his retirement marvellous distempered?
With drink, sir?
No, my lord, with choler.
Ah, your wisdom should show itself more richer to signify this to the doctor. For me to put him to his purgation would perhaps plunge him into more choler.
Brought into some pride and start not so wildly from my affair.
I'm tame, sir, pronounce.
Queen, your mother, in most great affliction of spirit, hath sent me to you.
You are welcome.
Nay, good my lord, this courtesy is not of the right breed.
Ah,
If it shall please you to make me a wholesome answer, I will do your mother's commandment. If not, your pardon and my return shall be the end of business.
My mother, you said. She desires to speak with you in her closet ere you go to bed. We shall obey were she 10 times our mother.
So as you see, they're not. I wasn't able to show you Gertrude, but the discussion of Gertrude, and you can see also the change in gender of I think it's Rosencrantz or Guildenstern, that you have a different social environment, but also, again, a change of gender identity. So if we think about this a little more than kin and less than kind, going back to the very specific words, kin is fairly straightforward, a noun meaning one's own family and relations, but kind, again, has multiple meanings, and I've just picked 3 of them. A noun meaning a group of people having things having a similar characteristics, as in all kinds of music, character, or nature. The trials were were different in kind from any that preceded them, or an adjective having or showing a friendly, generous, and considerate nature. So again, thinking about how this relates to a very specific social environment, one of the things that I wanted to think about was how this sentence, well, we have, he is more than kin. His uncle is now his stepfather and his king. And also this idea of being less than kind, not courteous, gentle, or benevolent, as you can see that that Hamlet was not being particularly in the last example, but also perhaps that they are not of the same kind, so having different characteristics. So, and this is one of the things that I thought was explored with the 2022 production at the Stratford Festival, where a Black woman is cast in the title role. And again, I want to ask about how this casting choice can change the relationship with the mother and set the whole play in a different context for the watching audience. Okay, so setting the play in the historic past can provide some understanding of the performance of the importance of having a strong leader in Denmark and how his mother's hasty marriage might be strategic. However, setting the play in a contemporary family environment or a different country changes the nature of the scene. Taking the play out of the world of kings and queens and placing it into the contemporary world where military leadership might contribute to becoming the leader of a country, again, changes the dynamic of the scene as well as the resonance, I think, for a current audience. So in this case, I'm very sorry. For some reason, I can't get rid of the ad at the beginning, but so you might have to sit through a few seconds of that. But again, it's a trailer for the 2022 production with a Black woman in the leading role. Guess that gives it a contemporary resonance as well. Right. So again, having the 3 productions and giving you the opportunity to see very, very different interpretations allows, again, to show different ways of getting at this idea of kingship. While there's still a king in England, in North America, I think it's much harder to get this idea across. And again, what is the difference between a political leader and a king? And the passing of power directly to the next leader without election is key in the monarchy, I would have thought, but it could also have some relevance in the current context in terms of the No More Kings movement. The other thing that particularly the Stratford Festival, the most recent production, did was to some extent the RSC production, but talk about the importance of surveillance in the court. And this is often, well, Hamlet is seen as being watched at all times, and this is sometimes enhanced by the physical presence of members of the court who watch the action. And again, in the thrust stage of the Stratford Festival, the guards came into the aisles, and again, they were all sort of, speaking into their cuffs, so that the spectators became part of the watching members of the surveillance culture that was giving permission to the kind of, dictatorial leadership that Claudius represented. So one of the benefits of having all of the resources of Digital Theatre Plus available in these texts was that I was able to establish, to go back to one of the ideas that I was using in designing Shakespeare, which is bringing in the ideas of practitioners as well. So in this case, I used the Andrew Scott, which again, quite well known in the UK. It talks about how difficult it is to provide he gives an actor's view on how to speak those very famous lines as if they are not, everybody doesn't already know them. So finally, I'm going to turn you to Macbeth, and this idea, again, you can see it's in pink, they're all color-coded, and just thinking about technical theater and the way that an awful lot of a production can occur outside of the text. And this final pathway focuses on the possibilities of demonstrating how the world of the play can be given a new message, I think, with each production, but from the perspective, these three productions I'm going to give you I'll just give you a quick interpretation from. This actually comes from Digital Theatre Plus. It's again from the beginning of the play. So the Liverpool Everyman production, again, is set in a dystopian future. The Stratford Festival production is a kind of rustic landscape from the past. And then the Tara Arts production, I actually have illustration of the production itself, but what I do have instead is an interview with the director, which again I think gives you this idea of talking with practitioners. And I'm actually going to let that, if time allows, to run for a little while so that you can hear what he has to say about the interpretation that is specific to a British Indian context. So we'll start just with this Macbeth. Liverpool Everyman.
I can't grey mountain catapults are not. Earth is foul and foul is fair. All that through the fog and filthy air.
Okay, I'm just going to pass from one to the next without comment. And then finally, I mean, one of the nice things about the collection from Digital Theatre Plus is that Tally Rogers, as the head of, the acquisition of smaller companies in Britain, and Tallow, the Black British company, and Tara Arts are both two companies that do classical theatre, but are looking at particular cultural communities within Britain. So again, I'm just going to let you see a little bit of this discussion, and hopefully it'll do.
I think boy play in Macbeth we have two worlds. The world which is that's the sort of real world of the characters, and then this extraordinary world of the witches. And once I knew that I was going to set it in a kind of like a modern nation family, it struck me that all patients, because they are migrants and therefore all migrants, carry in them two worlds, the world that they inhabit and the world which is a kind of distant memory of somewhere else. And so I thought, well, actually, what would happen if a young man was grown up here, but has also been fed at home by stories of some extraordinary power, a grandeur, full of blink and full of power? What would he feel when he first sees a group of people who look extraordinary and who remind him of stories that occurred of somewhere else? And would that sort of trip him into these thoughts of what he could be?
I think Macbeth in every culture resonates with that culture within the British Asian community. Yeah, of course, you know, these extended families and the squabble sort of family squabbles, you know, who's got more money. There's all that goes on. And sometimes it does lead to murder as well.
What I love about the concept of this play is it's the collision of two worlds. I think this difficulty of trying to progress with the modern world and keeping a relationship with the ancient spiritual world, I think that's a really interesting blend. What he's got is this contemporary, modern British Asian feel, and then he's got the supernatural world of the witches being very much from the old Indian world. He's using Nidra, the third sex, who are neither male nor female. There's all this sort of sense of the witches being out of time, and also not necessarily bound by gender. In India today, there is this sort of community called Hijras, and they have this ambivalent relationship with society. They are part of society and yet completely apart from it. They subscribe to neither gender, and the kind of provocation of them is to do with what they are. For most of us, we relate via gender. You know, is it a he, is it a she, and we kind of regulate ourselves according to that. When you're confronted by an individual who is neither and overtly asserts this neitherhood, where does that place you? They're mischievous. They are prophetic in that if you don't give them what they want, they'll curse you. And indeed, they'll also bless you in terms of what the future might hold. So they're kind of, I felt there's lots of resonances.
We got all the time.
Okay, so hopefully the way that this director explains his approach to the witches brings again the two worlds of Britain and India together. And in the same way that I'm quite keen on the Canadian British overlap, I think that looking at three different interpretations of the opening of this play, but all three plays, considers the way that different lenses of that we use in the digital in the interactive editions through language, whether through character or through technical theater, allow an examination of how directors and designers present those characters, the characters that are quite well known to audiences, in a way that invites a conversation in all three plays about the way power shifts from one leader to the next, and in a very for the present audience, giving all kinds of different resonances. So through these three examples from the interactive text, I hope that I've given you a sense of the wealth of resources that are available on the Digital Theatre Plus site, but also the way these resources are brought together with this new initiative. taking the central idea, the central text that acts as a navigational device from the Cambridge project, and combining that with illustrations of performance and interviews with practitioners from the Designing Shakespeare resource, it has been possible to develop these interactive texts that I think help users generate rich discussions of the play's central themes, as well as their performance histories. The pleasure I had in creating these interactive texts was coming from drawing attention both to well-known and often studied moments, but also lesser-known passages and even stage directions, where the on-stage action is crucial to understanding how the production has interpreted Shakespeare's work. So in conclusion, the journey I've traveled from creating a CD-ROM published by an academic press to working with a group of researchers to create a freely available internet resource, which was government-sponsored, to finally working with a large commercial, globally accessed resource has taught me a great deal about the means of production of learning resources as well as their content. The aim of all of my work has been to consider the relationship between the text of Shakespeare's plays and the stage in the digital world, the subject of this conference. I've been extremely fortunate to have the opportunity to work with some of the key producers of these resources and to document some of the most famous Shakespeare performances in the world. However, I understand that these resources do focus on very much a white Western tradition, and it's also been my very good fortune to have the opportunity to witness a wide range of performances that come from traditions outside the British and Commonwealth project. In particular, I'm going to be heading in a few weeks' time to the Craiova International Festival in Romania, where, which I believe is now the largest dedicated festival of Shakespeare performance in the world. It is my fifth visit to the Romanian festival, and I'll be watching productions from Europe, Asia, Africa, and North America, all of which will bring new insights into the plays. And I would suggest that the productions from Eastern Europe in particular are always very politically charged, and they reflect the daily struggles of countries that are currently at war. The usefulness of Shakespeare's plays, I think, in these contexts have not found their limitations. Rather, they've provided a springboard for new forms of creativity, including this year a competition for new plays, which I'm currently judging for the festival, which is entitled Shakespeare's Apprentice. So the performance history of the past, I don't think it does not limit future staging possibilities. Rather, the complex history of these plays provides a jumping off point for the next generation of theater makers. I hope I will continue to be given the opportunity to experience new approaches, and that my work will encourage other performance historians to build their own resources to chart the fascinating international cross-cultural dialogue that Shakespeare's work has generated and continues to inspire worldwide. And if you will indulge me, there's one last video I'd like to show you, which is a compilation of the last Romanian festival.
Don't stop.
Thank you very much. I think that gives you just a little bit of an overview of how widely Shakespeare is now performed and appreciated worldwide. And I think that there's plenty of work to be done on documenting all kinds of different theater productions and theater traditions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Christie. And that was one marvelous session with you. You brought so many worlds to us in this span of an hour or so. You introduced us to so many worlds, and you quite opened our minds three-dimensionally to an engagement with Shakespeare. So particularly, personally, I would like to say that the performances on Macbeth, which you showed us. Especially that made me rethink, when Lady Macbeth talks about being unsexed. So the performances, I mean, the interpretation of the witches in these scenes, made me think of the word unsexed in many postmodern contexts that I would never have thought of before. Also, I think in both the two of the videos, there was a gerontological approach as well, because the three witches, were from all age groups, in the gender portrayal, despite the difference in the gender portrayal. So I think, there was so much that you brought to us, and it opened our minds to the many ways that one can engage and re-engage with Shakespeare. And I'm sure every person who has been listening to you today, and everyone who listens to you via this recorded lecture in the future, will be able to, have a new insight into Shakespeare in these plays. The session is open now for a very brief question and answer session. So if there are members of the audience who would like to make comments, observations, or ask questions to Christie, you may please raise your hands and we will have you in. You can also type your questions in the chat box.
Yes. And I focused on resources that are freely available so that anyone can use them. I think that's one of the drawbacks, obviously, of working with a big company, that it's not available to everyone. But I was amazed. There are increasingly a lot of resources that you can draw on that are just on YouTube.
Yes, and that is, I think this is a kind of resource that people in our students particularly would not be aware of. So I think they'd be very grateful. We are very grateful that we can, we have been told about this so that this can be accessible to everyone. If there are questions from the audience, we would love to have you put your questions to Christie. If not, I think your lecture has left people, so overwhelmed with the variety of media that you used. Thank you very much for a very, very insightful session. And to formally deliver the vote of thanks, I would invite our colleague, Dr. Saket Kumar, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks for this session. Over to you, Saket.
Thank you.
It is my proud privilege to deliver the vote of thanks at the conclusion of this inspiring keynote session of our 3-day online international seminar on All the Internet is a Stage, Shakespeare and Digital Humanities, Exploring the Bard in the Algorithmic Age. We are deeply honored to have had Professor Christie Carson with us today here. Her keynote address on creating cross-cultural dialogue through contemporary Shakespeare performances has illuminated how Shakespeare's works continue to serve as bridges across cultures and communities. By highlighting the role of contemporary performances, she has shown us how the bard's voice resonates anew in diverse contexts, fostering dialogues and also the inclusivity in the digital age. Her references, her reflections on the Stratford Festival, Romanian Festival, several other production houses, they were particularly enriching. Through those examples, Professor has demonstrated how performance spaces can become sites of cultural exchange, where Shakespeare is not merely staged, but reinterpreted to speak to audiences across the globe. So this perspective has given us much to think about as we explore the intersections of Shakespeare performance and also definitely the digital humanities. So on behalf of the organizing committee, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to the professor for her scholarship, her insights, her generosity in sharing them with us. I acknowledge the tireless efforts of everyone, of every participant who have been here listening to this entire lecture. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this enriching session.
Well, best of luck with the rest of the conference.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So participants are reminded that after a while at 4:15, we'll be beginning with the 2 technical sessions today. So specifically the participants of the 2 technical sessions, they are requested to join on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And with this, we come to the end of today's keynote session. We look forward to the seminar continuing in other chat rooms. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Christie. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Good luck with it all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, ma'am.